how's it going? It's your pal Mike Squires, and this is the Couch Riffs podcast, episode number 238. My guest this episode is Keith Lowe, who is a fantastic bass player, both electric and upright, a classically trained guy who sort of found himself in all sorts of amazing situations because he's great, and as it turns out, a very cool guy. I had a great time talking with him. He has his first solo record coming out on Loose Groove Records on the 20th of January. By the way, it's 2023. If you're just jumping in, Happy New Year. So yeah, his record is coming out. It is fantastic ambient music, almost entirely upright bass. It is beautiful and intense and very cool, very cinematic. And if you close your eyes, you can completely sober have visuals. It's incredible. I had a bunch of emotional reactions listening to this music. Extraordinary. So I hope that you will go out and check that out. If you're listening before the 20th, there's a single posted that you can listen to. It's very, very nice. And like I said, the record comes out on the 20th. Go buy it, stream it, all that jazz. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Keith is a very, very cool guy. Also a deadhead. That surprised me. Not completely. It didn't sideswipe me. I knew he was a fan of Phil Lesh because someone told me that he had replicated one of his basses. Keith goes into that here in this podcast conversation and sort of goes into his whole love for the Grateful Dead. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, Keith has had a bunch of killer gigs, played with Fiona Apple, Bill Frisell, Wayne Horvitz, David Sylvian, and continues to gig weekly. So in Seattle, and also teach. If you are enjoying the Couch Riffs podcast, I invite you to support us at Patreon. Patreon.com/couchriffs. Every bit of support is greatly appreciated and sort of helps move us closer to realizing the bigger picture dream of maybe what Couch Riffs can be. And I have some fun ideas. I would love to get back to doing this the way the early episodes were. I went back and watched some of those videos, and I like them so much. And it was so fun to do. So I would love to be able to get back to that. Your Patreon support absolutely can enable that. So if you are already supporting, thank you so much. I would definitely like to thank Variety Coffee Roasters in Brooklyn, New York. I drink Variety Coffee every single day, sometimes all day. It's 9:30 at night right now, and I'm probably drank some coffee a little too late today because I had a podcast recording earlier. So, go check out their cafes. They have a number of cafes throughout Brooklyn and throughout Manhattan. Go visit their website. Order their coffee. They have a fantastic subscription service. You just plug in some details, and they just send it to you automatically. You never run out of coffee. There's nothing worse than when you wake up in the morning and you're like, shit, I don't have any coffee. Well, Variety's got you covered. So follow them on socials. Tell them I sent you if you want to. Or not. I don't care. Just support them. They're great folks too. Poor guy. I call them a lot. I call those guys. I'm so up their ass. I feel so badly for them sometimes, but they have a good sense of humor about it. Listen, don't forget the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated, right? It's not that hard. Just imagine being on the other end of the stick. And what else? Oh yeah, do your best to not be a dick. Keith, thanks so much for making time to speak with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
I've very much been enjoying your forthcoming, your album that's coming out in, I guess, it'll be 2 weeks once this hits. A week?
January 20th.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Soon. I want to talk about that, but I have a lot of stock stuff that I start with because I feel like it's a pretty interesting part to everyone's story to get to where we are now. And I wonder, where are you from?
I'm from Seattle.
You are?
Yeah. Born and raised.
How, where at in Seattle?
Mercer Island.
How does a kid from Mercer Island get into the circle that you are in?
Well, not sure what circle I'm in, but I, came from a musical family and just started studying music at the age of 10 and started playing with everybody I could.
Was bass your first instrument?
Yes. When they came around, whoever they are, but they came around in the 4th grade and said, "Hey, you can pick an instrument. What do you want to play?" And I thought, well, what'll get me a lot of attention? Trombone. People will laugh at that. So, thank goodness, they said, "Oh no, your arms are too short. So what else do you want to play?" Then they must have had enough trombone players
with long arms.
Yeah. So then I was like, "Oh, what else? Bass. I want to play bass." So apparently, too short of arms to play trombone, but not too short to play a bass.
What did they start you? Did they start you on a half scale?
It was a full-size cello tuned like a bass.
Is that common?
I guess for someone of that age, 10-year-olds, yeah.
Do you remember what it was like to adjust when you moved over to a bass, and did you go to a half or a 3/4 scale?
Yeah, boy. Yeah, we after I forget how long I stayed on that instrument. But pretty soon it was I guess it's what's known as a half size.
Yeah.
And I still have that. It's made into a bookcase. It's downstairs. But yeah, just kind of slowly started getting bigger and bigger basses. I believe I'm at a 3/4 right now.
You play 3/4 bass now, yeah. I think it's kind of wild that a kid would choose the upright bass. You said your parents were musical?
Yeah, they didn't play a lot. My dad played a little bit of a lot of things, like a little bit of fiddle, a little bit of accordion, a little bit of guitar, a little bit of mandolin. But what I saw him play the most was bagpipes.
Right.
So he did that. And then my mom played piano, and in her youth, she played clarinet. But, they weren't playing a lot at home, when we were growing up.
There's music happening in the house. You guys are listening to music.
Yeah, and I'm the youngest of 5, and everybody played a classical instrument. We had a cellist, a French horn player, and 2 violinists, and then me as a bass player.
What do you call the five? What is that called? The little 5-piece, or is that called a chamber?
Yeah, chamber orchestra, basically. Yeah.
Your parents had a design.
Yeah, they for some reason really wanted us to all play classical music, and I'm really thankful for that. My father was really, they were both really supportive. You know, my mother would practice along with me on piano as I, learned how to read music. But my
Oh, that's
dad would
awesome.
drive each of us kids to private music lessons every week. 5 kids, 5 lessons a week.
Wow.
So yeah. And I
That
just
is a
want to
lot
give a
of
shout.
work.
That is. They were very dedicated to having music be a big part of our lives.
When did you
And
start?
I just want to give a big shout out to my bass teacher, Ron Simon, who I studied with for, I forget, 8 to 10 years or so, weekly.
Oh,
Just
wow.
amazing player in the symphony here in Seattle and taught so many bassists in town. So,
I might
thanks, Ron.
screw this up, but did you offer bass lessons in the 90s?
Uh, maybe it. I I don't know. If I did, it was like individual people who expressed interest in taking from me. You
Yeah.
know.
I feel like
I
I talked to you on the phone once, but I just couldn't get out of my own way to
uh-huh.
actually get good at playing the upright bass. Eventually I got rid of it, but
Oh, well,
it,
I'm sorry about that.
oh no, it wasn't your fault. You were, yeah, I mean, if it was you that I spoke to, I've gone on for 25 years thinking that it was.
Okay, well,
Uh
I'm sure it was.
yeah,
That if you expressed interest and got in touch, that's what it takes for me. That's what it took for me back then to give
right.
lessons.
It could have been through like the Bass Northwest guys.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me. I did teach there, and
Oh,
now
was it?
currently teach
Oh,
at the Seattle Drum School.
oh,
But
awesome.
yeah, back then I did teach a little bit out of Base Northwest in Pioneer Square.
Yeah. Um, when did you, for a teenage kid, playing orchestra music is not the coolest amongst of teen peers. Did you have like a parallel life where you were playing electric instrument and in an electric band also, or were you like, this is my thing?
Well, um, yeah. So I started acoustic bass at 10, and then at 11 I started messing around with electric bass. Um, and yeah, I enjoyed playing in symphonies, Seattle Youth Symphony a lot because we got to play some really epic pieces, and I'm really happy I had that experience. But yeah, of course, as a teenager, you're interested in rock and roll. Oh yeah, at classical music camp, I heard Led Zeppelin 2 for the first time, and that was kind of it. I came home and told my parents I need Led Zeppelin 2, and you know, that was a big shift.
They were like Led Zeppelin in addition to what? You're like, no,
Uh,
Led Zeppelin too. Uh,
yes,
well, there are some, there's some real bass playing on that album.
yes, man.
The
Yeah, I
Unsung
remember
Hero.
my mom's comment as soon as I put it on. She was like, "Well, you sure can hear the bass." That's right.
I think
Yeah.
he's the unsung hero of that band.
Yes. Totally. Totally. Just beautiful, fluid bass lines, but solid, and his arranging and all that stuff.
Did that inform a lot of your electric playing early on? Did you go through a phase of learning all of that catalog?
Yeah. Well, definitely Led Zeppelin 2. I used to play along with that a lot. And I got into, what is it, 4?
Mm-hmm.
With Black Dog and all that. I'd play along with that, but Led Zeppelin 2 is kind of my main rock album to play along to.
The bass line in The Immigrant Song, which is on 2, nobody ever...
That would be 3.
Is it on 3?
That's on 3. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm
Well,
I'm 99.9%.
We're going to go with your opinion on this one.
Okay.
But that song doesn't, people don't comment on the bass line, but it is ripping.
Yeah, that's a bear. I play in a Led Zeppelin group every once in a while, and man, when we do that one, it's tough.
Do you play it with a pick, or do you rip that?
What's that?
Yeah, just like ripping major scale up, like...
Yeah.
Do you do that with your fingers or with a pick?
Fingers.
Nice.
And kind of a hammer-on technique, I
got it.
I'm kind of, chicanery there and smoke and mirrors.
Uh-huh. Nice.
But it sounds as if I am playing it.
Well, then you are. If it seems like it and it sounds like it, then you are.
Okay. Good.
So, did you start playing, parallel to being in orchestra? Were you playing in rock bands in high school?
Yeah. There was a rock band I joined, or that was formed with me, and some slightly older players, and that was called Mind. And we
were you guys prog rock?
We weren't prog rock, but the keyboard player really turned me on to some awesome prog rock, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Gentle Giant was really big for me because it was like classical music, but it rocked.
Right. Did you go through a Yes phase?
I wish I had early on, but back then I was like, yes. But I love them. And man, only about 10 years ago, I thought I got to go deep on this. So I would buy a CD and I'd put it on and I'd lay on my bed with headphones and just absorb each one. And yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. That's inspiring to me that 10 years ago you were still putting music on, listening to it on headphones and laying on your bed. A lot of us get burnt, and when I say us, I'm, maybe putting myself in a category that I don't necessarily rank to be in. But as we get older, we're not listening to music the same way, or we're burned out or whatever. But that kind of tells me that you still have an enthusiasm for music that you have had your whole life.
Well, that's nice. Yeah, it seems like that seemed like the thing to do, and I knew I had neglected that band, and I wanted to really give it a chance and absorb it as deeply as possible.
I think that I think I still have the stems for close to the edge, and I'll send them to you.
Please do.
For the whole album, they're fucking incredible.
Wow. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite one of that band. Hard to put Fragile second, but
Right.
Yeah, close to the edge. Pretty amazing. Really amazing.
Yes. So what was Mind doing? Were you guys doing original music or cover songs?
Cover tunes. We did a lot of Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers, The Doors.
You guys were chugling.
Chugling?
You guys were chugling.
You'll have to tell me what that is.
I don't really know, but it kind of seems like chugling is what those bands do.
Interesting. Chugling. Yeah.
I feel like someone told me that you are a Grateful Dead fan and remain a Grateful Dead fan. Maybe you have some sort of bass that's modeled after.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. It's
after
right
one
over
of
there.
Phil's basses. What is that?
Yeah. It's his. When I saw his early '70s Guild Starfire, that he had modified by Alembic, the one with all the knobs. I mean, he had a couple of basses with a lot of knobs, but the hollow body, the one they first kind of messed around with, that just blew my mind. Like, what is that? I'm going to have that one day. So, yeah.
Do you have a bass with as many knobs? Any other bass with as many knobs as that?
No. That one has 14 knobs.
Is that right?
Yeah. There's a lot of redundancy in there. Like, there's a super filter in there, which is something Alembic came up with. Basically a high pass, band pass, low pass filtering system. And so there's filter volume for bridge pickup, filter volume for neck pickup,
right?
Clean volume for bridge pickup, clean volume for bridge pickup, overall volume for bridge, overall.
What percentage of the tonal capability of that thing do you think you utilize, and what do you think Phil actually used?
Well, in talking with Rick Turner, who was one of the founders of Alembic, when I first started coming up with the idea of doing this, he was like, you know what? We put a lot of stuff in that bass that we ended up not needing. So, there's a lot going on there, especially his, because his was quadraphonic, and an individual pickup and output for each string, which I don't need. I don't want to carry around 4 bass amps, let alone freaking one big one.
Right.
So I utilize the filtering, basically band pass and high pass. Low pass is just way, 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 way too deep.
Right.
But it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So you would say that band and his playing had a big influence on you?
Yes. First off, just I know there's a lot of eras of the Grateful Dead that are not great.
I only ever saw them in the 90s.
Yeah, I started in '79 and went to the very end. But in later in my life, I kind of just focus on the early '70s because single drummer thing for me is the best.
Right.
When it was only Billy. But yeah, I kind of learned how to improvise from that music, because in high school, I wasn't playing very much jazz, in stage band I was, but, our rock band did a lot of space jams, like the Grateful Dead. And so you just kind of learn how to listen to people and, Yeah. So, hey, here's my kitty cat. Good boy. Um, there's Dickon. Good boy.
Hey, buddy. I got my dog is I'm thinking about making some shirts that just have my dog like sitting up into a frame like this, because he's in every podcast that I'm in.
I saw that. Yeah, that's good.
He will not be on my lap. If there's a lap to be had, he's on it.
That's a good dog.
He's not necessarily attached to me. He's he'd run off with the first person with a lap or a snack. Not a faithful companion.
Oh, I think he loves you.
Oh, while I'm sitting, for sure.
Good.
So when was the first time that you saw the band, and do you remember how you felt when you walked away from that show?
I saw them July 1st, my birthday.
Oh.
1979
Yeah.
at the Coliseum. And, I was just thrilled to see them and hear them because I'd been playing that music quite a bit. Well, I'd just been starting because actually high school for me was 79 through 81. And I think I joined that band in 79. So, yeah, it was really exciting. I loved it. And Phil, I'm a big fan of Phil's, but I know he can. Phil works in the Grateful Dead, and any place else, it's not going to work. And man, one time I heard a recording of another favorite bass player of mine sitting in with the Grateful Dead, Barry Oakley from the Allman Brothers.
Uh-huh.
Who later died. So he was only in it for a little while. He died right after Dwayne. I heard a recording of Barry sitting in with them, and I love Barry Oakley. But man, it sounded weird. It really sounded weird having a traditional bass player in that.
Right.
So I don't know what we were talking about, but Phil.
I've heard the tape of Rob Halford singing with Black Sabbath, and it sounds weird too.
Right?
Sounds really weird.
Context, I guess. Yeah.
So I'm starting to put together this the sort of the secret recipe for the soup here. It seems unlikely to me that an orchestra and stage band jazz kid would have this parallel life of being a deadhead. But here we are. And so after high school, did you further study jazz as well? Jazz composition or performance?
Not composition, but jazz a little bit. I wish I'd studied that more. But
Me too.
Right. Oh, the years we've lost. But in high school, one of the teachers in high school, this guy named Bob Gwen, was a jazz bass player, and he noticed that I was decent, and he knew this guy named this avant-garde piano player named Al Hood. And he taught at Seattle Central Community College. So, and what he taught was like, you just joined and you would be in a band, and he would have you play Ornette Coleman and all sorts of crazy shit, and, kind of learn how to improvise. So while I was in high school, Bob said, you know what? you should take this class, and it's at like 4:00, and I'll give you a ride. So after after class in high school, he would drive me over to Seattle Central, and I'd study with Al. Yeah, and I forget how often that was. Maybe it was once a week, maybe it's twice. I can't remember. But that was a start into, learning jazz. And after a while, Al hired me to be in his band for a little bit with this great reed player, clarinet player named Mike Davenport. And so we did that for a little bit. And I also studied big band with this guy out at North Seattle Community College named Fred Radke, who was Harry James's lead trumpet player back in the day.
Wow.
And, that was quite an education.
So when you got out of high school, were you working, or did you go straight to being a working musician?
I had one job, because my dad was like, "Get a job or you're out of here." So
I drove your ass around forever.
Yeah.
You're getting a job.
Now do something. So I had a job at the Squire Shop warehouse on the other side of the floating bridge.
Nice.
Yeah, I did that for a summer. And then I, just started getting gigs. There was a famous Seattle bass player named Buddy Catlett, jazz bass player. And he recommended me for a gig with this guy named Mickey Martin. And he was this old black man who used to play in Jack Ruby's club in Chicago, the guy that killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
Sure. And
Mickey Martin was like, he played guitar a little bit and sang, but he also tap danced and, just kind of an old school entertainer.
Right.
And, I think when I was about 20, I was playing with him, and it was a weekly thing at a club in Bellevue. And so, we were doing tunes from the 30s and 40s. And my dad died really early on, but he did see me play that gig, and that really made him happy. So
that's amazing.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I loved to answer a previous question. How do you play, or why do you play all this music? I just love playing, and any opportunity I can get to play any kind of music, I'm really happy about. And it just has kind of fed my voice a little bit, just pulling on these different genres. So it never occurred to me to be like, oh, playing music from the 30s is dorky,
Sure. So, I mean, you have a 42-year and running career at this point, which is incredible.
Man, I feel so blessed about it.
I applaud you.
Thanks.
Is there a gig that has come along where you felt like a fish out of water, or where you felt like you were maybe not prepared? It seems like your musicality has prepared you for anything, but has there been any gig that has come along that you've done where you're like, well, this is a weird one for me?
I'm sure. But I think mostly, when I've been blessed to get calls for some bigger name gigs, that I felt like the music I was capable of, but more like what am I doing in this caliber of, you know,
Right.
players like
What was
Bill
the first?
Frisell.
What a absolute monster, right?
Yeah, so that was really intimidating. Although, he at that time he was really into country music, and I was playing in a band that did some country. Now I play a lot more country, but um, yeah. So it wasn't like deep jazz explorations
Right.
where you need to know all this harmony stuff, which um, we were playing really cool old country tunes in a really interesting way. So that was cool. But I felt kind of like, do I deserve to be here? That kind of
I mean, it's wild for me to hear other people say, I've felt like that many times in my life, but it's always wild for me to hear other people say that they've felt that way, especially because a lot of times we view other people and their talents completely differently than ourselves and our own.
yeah, 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 absolutely. I know perhaps I shouldn't be admitting this, but I do suffer from imposter syndrome quite a bit.
Uh, I think I'm shocked by how many people I speak to that do, you know, just
Yeah. Well, I guess so. And it's been a really great lesson for me, and learning experience to to acknowledge that, okay, I am a good player and I do deserve to be here. It still feels odd to say it, but you know it I'm trying to acknowledge that a little more and more.
sure. Do you think that that general sensibility is going to disappear with the way kids are growing up with social media and seeing themselves on a screen and thinking they're a star already?
Wow. Um, yeah, I don't think it'll ever disappear. Because the human psyche can be really fragile, no
Sure.
matter what. Um, but yeah, mostly I think with the technology of the internet and, man, YouTube. I can't imagine what it'd be like to have YouTube when I was learning how to play.
Well, I
Just
mean, I don't know how deep you've gone on watching people play recently, but people are doing crazy things that sound like video game music on guitars and basses now. And it's hard
yeah,
for me to, even though I'm looking at it, it's hard for me to fathom that it's being performed and they're not lip syncing to some sort of chopped up, edited thing. It's like some sort of choreographed dance. They're really doing it. It's wild.
right. Yeah, and really young too. I mean, there's a lot of lot of very young bass players who are total badasses.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Well, you started when you were 10. That's young.
that it was young, but I wasn't shredding at that time like some of
Right.
these are today.
When you were teaching, I had students who were 6 and 7 when I was teaching some guitar, and it was really difficult. I remember it being a very slow process, and difficult because it's just a unwieldy instrument for tiny hands. And I'm
Right.
curious, what was the youngest student you ever took on? Did you ever take any young people?
Not super young. No, like 12.
Still pretty
You know,
young.
it is. It is. And if they're into playing and learning, it can be really rewarding. But sometimes you just, like one of my recent young students was like, I asked him, why are you here? What do you want to learn?
Right.
What is it? And he's like, well, I'm here just to be good enough so my teacher doesn't get mad at me, or, my school teacher.
Right.
And he just couldn't give a crap,
You can't
about
teach
getting
that.
any. What's that?
You can't teach that.
No. So after a while, I had to hand him off because to somebody else who does that really well, and for me, I don't know. I'm not trying to sound high and mighty, but it's kind of soul crushing to be around.
It's the opposite of exciting.
Yes,
You
yes.
know?
It's just kind of disheartening.
When you see the light go on in a kid's eyes as you're teaching them, and they grab something, and they take off with it, it's amazing. It always
Yeah,
reminded me of the first year, 2, 3 years that I was, playing. And it made me feel the same way again, all over again. It was great.
yeah. Isn't that exciting?
There's nothing
Yeah,
worse than
and
feeling like a 30-minute babysitter, though.
yes, don't like that. But yeah, teaching can be really good for the teacher. I have to. I even though I took a lot of lessons and played a little bit of jazz, the majority of my upbringing was really technical, orchestral playing.
Yeah.
So I don't, I play a lot by ear. I have pretty good facility because of all the technical training, but most of my, harmonic sense is just from using my ear and, playing along with records when I was a kid and stuff like that. So, I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah. So teaching, it kind of makes you think about, well, why do I do this, and what is important at this stage of their development.
Right.
I'm having a really good time teaching right now because I got some good students
That's awesome.
who are into it, and I really, really enjoy it.
I want to go back to the first 10 or so years when you were gigging. Were all of the gigs that you were doing around the Northwest and, Seattle, Bellevue? Welcome back, Kitty. Or were you going on the road at all?
Early on, like in my early 20s, I was playing in a really fun R&B band, Duffy Bishop and the Rhythm Dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And we worked a lot around town, and we'd go down to Portland a little bit and up into Vancouver, but pretty much around the scene down here. And we worked a lot, so I felt like I was pretty happy.
Yeah.
And then doing the odd thing on the side, and I did that really steadily, along with the side jazz gig or something. I did that really, really regularly until about 96 when I got a call to play with Fiona Apple. And that kind of changed my trajectory a little bit. It took me out of being just in one band.
Sure.
Which the band was amazing. I love it. And we still play together to this day, just not very often.
The Duffy
But
Bishop
yeah,
band.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just did a string of shows recently.
Nice.
they're family, you know.
Yeah.
I'll always be indebted to them, and I will always love them.
Amazing. There's something about a musical connection, and especially just like hundreds of gigs with someone that it's a it's as close as family.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's your kind of chosen family. And there really is a bond at that early stage, you know.
Depending on what
Things
kind of
are
band you're
happening.
in, or what
What's
kind of
that?
situations, depending on what kind of situations you find yourself in, you can really go through some stuff together too.
Yes. Oh, man. I went through a lot of not great things because I was an alcoholic. And that really came to light during that run. And
Sure.
they cared for me and they stuck with me. And, you know, it wasn't like I was showing up hammered to gigs, but I was drinking way too much. And they were just really supportive. And I always look back on that as like, thank you so much for the strength you tried to, you by your example and all that, they were great. And also, not just bad stuff like that for me being a drinker back then, but learning how to be a performer from Duffy, who is an amazing performer and really engaging and really outgoing and gives it her all and always did, no matter if there were a few people there or there was a ton of people there. She always just gave it her all. So, yeah, growing up and becoming a professional musician, experiencing that firsthand was really, really big.
Because you brought up drinking, I am also sober. Um, do you recall your first show playing after you got yourself sober?
Wow. Man, I wish I did.
Because
Uh,
usually I talk to people and they're like, I don't remember my last show before quitting.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I more so, I just remember the shift
Sure.
from playing drunk and then, playing in the same scene. I lived in Pioneer Square at the time, which was fucking drunk haven,
Yeah. You couldn't
all
walk
those.
10 feet.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, it was just a big shift, obviously, but, what really helped me, what kind of enabled me in the drunk years became what helped me, just the seeing, going out your door and just seeing college kids just hammered and stumbling around. uh it used to be, okay, this is my neighborhood, this is what you do, woo. Then it turned into, fuck, I do not want to be like that. And
Yeah.
so it really helped reinforce, like, there's just example after example out there of why I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, if I smell booze, I am immediately like my olfactory senses immediately make me remember the feeling of a hangover, which is,
Mm.
I'm certain, the feeling of a horrible death, of a horrible slow death, really, is what
Yeah.
it.
Wow. Intense.
Pretty
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah. And interesting. Yeah, that's interesting that you said that. Because, yeah, that's basically kind of what we were doing. I don't know about you, but I was subconsciously slowly killing myself because it seemed like the thing to do as a musician, or, let alone all the personal struggles I had,
Sure.
you know, on my own, you know. But yeah, well, I'm really happy you got through that.
I'm
When did you
happy you
quit?
did. Well, not my first time to the rodeo, but I've got 6 years now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I moved to New York and had one of these moments where I was like, everything is great in my life and I'm happy and like no shitty things are happening. I could probably have a drink, right?
Right.
It doesn't really
Yeah.
work that way.
I had one of those. Yeah. I had that too. And yeah. So
Yeah.
I totally understand.
Yeah, it doesn't really work that way. Like
Yeah.
within 3 months, I was on the stoop of my apartment building, like drinking out of a bag with some homeless people watching the sun come up.
Yeah.
Totally
Wow.
normal.
It's
Totally
what you
normal.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand. Yeah. Really quickly for me, when I thought I could pick it up again, I was sitting at home on the couch with a bottle of vodka,
That's how
just
it
drinking
goes.
by myself. So why did I choose to do this again?
Right. When you made the choice uh, in its finality, um, did you find any extra motivation to be creative or work, or were you just like, was it was it more utilitarian, like this just doesn't work, time to go do the
Um, you mean after I quit?
Yeah, did you feel extra motivated? Like,
Uh
what
huh.
did you do to, let's be real. We all substitute something there. Most of us get a
Right.
sweet tooth. Um, yeah.
Just gave
Some,
up sugar.
oh,
Um, that's a
what do you,
hard one. So yeah, I mean, I just remember having more energy,
yeah,
and then obviously more time. That was a big thing. It's like I have so much time now that I'm not drunk
yeah,
all the time. So I just leaned into playing music more.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm really happy it was there.
Yeah.
It would have been hard.
Um, I remember seeing you, because I had seen you around town. Well, actually, first, how did your life run parallel to? You've seen Seattle go through a lot. How did your life run in conjunction with the early 90s influx of musicians? I showed up then, although I didn't live far away. I was a Washington person. Um, but how did that affect what you were doing, and what was your impression of every all of that was happening? And let's start there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was certainly happy that stuff seemed to be happening for for the music scene.
Yeah.
It wasn't a scene I was in, you know, at that time, you know. So yeah, I was in the R&B band thing, and that didn't line up with grunge or
Right. Mud
the
Honey.
indie rock that was happening. But I met um, Stone Gossard back then briefly, and then as my life went on, I hooked up with him more, um, and used to hang out at the OK Hotel, playing music, and then Ben Shepherd was there all the time.
Yeah.
So, which was interesting.
I crossed paths with Ben plenty of times back then.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So that was about it. Later I started playing with Stone, um, in a little band he started. I was just looking at videos of those the other day because someone was curious about it. But we had a little band called the Hank Choir.
You're right.
And Stone formed it because he wanted to work on singing. And he thought, well, we'll do Hank Williams. So yeah, started playing music with him back then. That had to, I don't know, I'd have to look at the date on the video, but that had to be after Fiona, I think.
I think if I remember, I feel like you guys would you occasionally do a gig in the little cabaret that used to be the Patty, what was the jazz cabaret in the Pike Place Market?
Oh yeah.
Patty,
I forget what that was called. We did play there.
yeah.
And that was after, the Hank Choir was a quartet originally, with Barb Ireland on vocals and Hans Teuber, amazing multi-instrumentalist, and myself on upright and Stone. But then after a while, Stone kept adding players to it. And by the time we did gigs there, that was a pretty big band.
It's a funny place to have a big band.
Yeah. But it was a really fun opportunity, of course. And then later that led to playing with him in the group Brad, which was fantastic. And still is. We have an album coming out soon.
Oh, amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Is that will you tell me, are you at liberty to tell me how that comes together? Is it with another singer, or is it archival?
No. Brad as a band, kind of inactive a lot. It would go through spurts. And when we had those spurts of activity, we'd be in the studio a lot, and we'd just come up with tunes and work on ideas together. And so we tended to stockpile songs. And so there were some from that. Some of the songs on that record are definitely from that. And we kind of worked on them maybe a year ago. We all got together and was like, you know what, we should do something with what we have. So we kind of shored them up. And then we had some Sean Smith demos and worked those up. And there's some really, really great stuff on that record. I really am happy with it.
Do you know when that will come out?
I don't. I actually asked them, hey, I'm doing this podcast. When is that thing coming out?
That's very exciting.
Yeah, it should be hopefully in the spring.
Yeah, great. I would like to ask you about touring with Matt and doing that gig. I remember seeing you on TV and thinking to myself, holy shit, I've seen that guy walking around Pioneer Square. Like it's one of those, it's one of those moments where you're like, I don't know if I should have been paying more attention in Pioneer Square, or if it's just I was intimidated by a lot back then,
Sure.
Which is probably why I never pursued getting bass lessons, and also I'd never really toured or really gigged outside of like the fucking Swan and the Color Box. So when your experiences are limited to that, there's a lot you don't understand. But I remember distinctly seeing you on television and thinking, Holy shit. Look at that. And I wonder, were you thinking the same thing? Because that was a real rocket ship.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had no illusions that that would be in my future, you know. So when it happened, I felt really, really blessed, and you know, it was an amazing opportunity for sure. And to watch that grow from just doing showcase performances in Europe, and then uh, opening for different bands. And then, you know, I remember the first day we did our own performance. You know, we weren't headlining; we were the headliner, and yeah, that was, and to watch that thing just take off, it was really amazing, and uh, you know, kind of seems like a dream,
And
and it seemed like a dream then.
and in the context of the level of those performances, a lot of let's be honest, a lot of times when you see a show in an arena, the music can be dumbed down, and it's not that interesting. It's pretty stock. A lot of popular charting music that, you know, the music that reaches people is, you know, filtered through whatever controls it, and it's not that great. And that's interesting music. And so
Yeah,
it must, yeah, I know you were on the road for a while. I'm sure that it kept you engaged as well.
yeah, absolutely. You know, as you mentioned, that music is really interesting and it's deep. And the parts were cool, and how the parts interacted with each other. You know, it was really a sophisticated. Uh, it was sophisticated music. Um, so yeah, it was really engaging, and um, you know, Fiona was is an amazing artist, and you know, back then, I mean, to this, one of the things that makes her wonderful is that she's really just stuck to her guns. And,
And
you
she was
know,
young.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember if she was 16 or 17 when I started,
That's
but
crazy.
really, really young. And
Right.
writing beautiful stuff. Um, I think there was that tune called Pale September on her first record. And gorgeous piano ballad, and I believe there's some string parts by Van Dyke Parks. But you know, mid teenager writing
Yeah.
that
Beyond her
kind of,
years.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. She's amazing. She's really amazing.
At the end of all that, what did you find yourself doing?
Um. After the connection with Fiona stopped.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I toured the first two records, so that kept me busy for like, I think 5 years.
That's
And then
awesome.
after that, I thought, well, hell, I need these kind of gigs. What am I going to do?
Me too.
uh, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember contacting a manager like in LA of somebody. I forget who it was, but
Was
you
it Barry
know,
Squire?
I don't know. I really don't know.
He's like the guy that puts bands together down there.
Oh, maybe it was. So, I remember talking to him and like, hey, how do I, I've been doing this. How do I keep this up? And first off, he was like, well, how did you get the gig? And I'm like, well, Matt Chamberlain recommended me. And he's like, well, Matt can live anywhere. And, because he was saying, what, you live in Seattle?
Then why did Matt move to LA?
Yeah. So he would have to travel less.
Right.
So, yeah, then, whoever that was, maybe it was that guy you mentioned. He's like, well, get a LA cell phone and just, keep your eye out for auditions and stuff and just pretend you live in LA.
Did you do it? No,
I didn't.
Good for you.
Yeah. That work was amazing. LA's not my favorite place.
Yeah.
The caliber of musicianship you get to work with down there is pretty great. But also up here, and I'm really a homebody. I hate to say. So I was like, do I want to move down to LA? Do I want to do that with my life? And I just thought, yeah, no.
Therein lies the difficulty of being a professional musician, right? It's like going on the road on and off for 5 years is rewarding in a lot of ways. Financially is one of them because it's a lot of regular work, and if you've got the right gig, you've got a retainer, and those aren't flying around a lot lately.
No.
But but you also, and you're playing a lot, right? You're playing almost every night, but it's not the easiest life. And then you get home and you're like, oh man, I love this. Home, it's great.
Right. Yeah. So, luckily, my touring life kind of kept on after Fiona, and it just kind of kept stepping up in my view. So, I've really had a blessed life, and I've been able to live at home, and hooking up with Bill Frisell was great. We toured a lot and recorded a record, and then knowing Bill, first I got to give credit where credit is due, and also this is a story about connections, and so I got connected to Wayne Horvitz, who's a brilliant jazz keyboardist.
Yeah.
Formerly of New York, used to play with Bill and John Zorn's Naked City. Awesome, freaking crazy band.
Yes.
And Wayne moved out here, and I got introduced to him and started playing with him. And that was one of the areas where you mentioned, it's like, did you ever feel like, what am I doing here? And, kind of with him. But turns out Wayne's a big deadhead.
Is that right?
Yeah. So one of his first not one of his first bands, but one of his bands here in town was called Pigpen. And
right.
I always thought it was like named after the, Snoopy guy, but it was Pigpen from Grateful Dead. And one of our records we did, we kind of recreated the cover of Working Man's Dead, so anyway, so Wayne, long story longer, hooking up with Wayne, amazing. And then Bill Frisell followed Wayne out here, and Wayne was like, you know what, Bill, you should play with this guy, Keith. So that happened. And then this singer named David Sylvian, who is incredible. Bill had played on one of his records, and David asked Bill, like, hey, I'm getting ready to do a tour. Who do you know that plays electric and upright bass? And Bill was like, hey, get Keith Lowe. So just the connectivity of all that has been really, I've been really fortunate with all that. And as you know, I was able to live at home and continue doing some really, really amazing things. So it all worked out.
In the context of your career, it seems paramount that you were able to play both electric and upright bass.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. It's gotten me a lot of work, you know.
I've
And
been
then,
thinking about
you
getting an upright bass lately, again, because I'm a dingaling. And, I don't have a ton of room, but for whatever reason, I'm gravitated towards it. And there's that part of me that wants to, like, oh, just get an electric upright and see if you can handle it. But they all seem a little dorky.
I'll back you up on that for sure. Um, yeah, I got one kind of early on, and the first tour I did with David Sylvian, we were able to bring my upright bass, and an electric bass. But the second one I did with him, the budget was a little smaller, so I took my electric upright bass, and man, it sounded good and it travels better, but it makes you play really different. For maybe if it's the first upright instrument you get, it won't be that difficult for you. But for me, growing up with this thing that had the shape that dictated where certain notes were,
Right.
and it held itself at a certain place, and you're just used to all the, you know, spatial relations in that.
Right.
And then when you strip that away, it's like, I have no idea where notes are now. So you play differently,
Sure.
but they're definitely cool. They have their place. But man, I highly encourage you to get an upright. Just get rid of a couple of
These fancy
electric
things.
guitars.
I have nothing but a bunch of weird basses now. Like I don't own a single P bass.
Man, that's great.
Do you
That's
think
really
that's
fun.
great? I think I
Yeah.
have like 3 short scale basses, a 5-string
Perfect.
bass, a fretless, and then this jazz bass. And that's I feel like I'm, missing some things. I'm missing a P bass and probably a Warlock bass. I need something evil. You know?
Well, that will come from your mind.
Yeah,
But
probably.
yeah, I went for the longest time without a Fender. God, and I only got one when I joined Brad. Because I needed something a little more aggressive, and everybody else, the 2 other bass players in that band both had P basses. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to get one too. But all up until that time, short scale basses is what I played, and I really prefer them.
Is that right?
My main bass, the Longhorn, is a short scale,
The Dan Electro.
and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to me,
Yeah.
they have a really they have a more unique tone. They can be deeper and thumpier, whereas regulation length Fenders, they're more ringy and
Right.
punchy, which can be really nice if that's what you want. But I tend to gravitate towards tone that's a little deeper and thumpier.
I picked up a very trashed Music Master. Someone had drilled 2 more holes in the headstock, um and so there they still are there, 2 just holes where tuners used to be. And it had an EMG humbucker in it, so that tells me they had turned it into maybe a baritone or a 6-string bass or something. And it was trash, and I got it for really cheap. Got a new nut, new pick guard, new bridge, and I put a Seymour Duncan Hot Rails Strat pickup in it, and it is gorgeous. It sounds better than a P bass.
Nice.
But I'm a big
Wonderful.
kid, so I look funny playing it on stage. You know. But
I bet
I
it
do
sounds
love
great.
them. I do love
Yeah.
those short scales. Yeah, so I want to talk about your record, and it is to I don't know. I've just heard it. It's about a bit over 40 minutes running time, 6 songs, have beautiful ambient music, almost entirely ambient music. Uh, I can identify the upright bass on it, the bowed bass, particularly in the single. However, there's a lot going on and a lot of just sort of sonic padding, and I don't know what's happening. Will you tell me about the record?
Yeah, happy to. Um, yeah. So it was a long journey coming to it. Um, and just briefly, David Sylvian, when we were touring together, we both shared a love of ambient music, and he's like, you know what, you should make a record with an ambient record with just acoustic bass. And at that time, I was like, yeah, right, like that could be a thing. But anyway, so it took a while. Um,
Are you about to
and
tell me those are the every sound on there is the bass?
Almost, yeah.
Wow.
There are a couple of guest artists. You know, the voice you hear, obviously, that's a voice. Um, and then there's these piano shimmers, and that's definitely piano, and almost unrecognizable as
Right.
piano. But I'd say 90% of the record is acoustic bass,
Wow.
bowed with some trickery, uh, some outboard effects,
Mm-hmm.
and then playing near. You can get a lot of tones out of an acoustic bass just by where you bow in relation to the bridge. The closer you get to the bridge, the thinner it gets, and it gets really kind of wispy sounding. And that's if you play it light down there. And if you play it hard down there, it sounds like you're playing through a distortion box. So there's a lot of variation you can do just without any effects.
Right.
So I had always been messing around on acoustic bass when I discovered false harmonics, and those sounds ethereal and kind of unidentifiable
Yeah.
as acoustic bass. So then you go adding a little bit of magic to that, and it doesn't sound anything like a bass.
When you say magic, you mean some reverb algorithms and a little bit of delay,
Yeah, yeah,
echoing, and yeah.
yeah. Yeah, when it smooths it out and tones start overlapping a little bit, it gets really dreamy.
When it came to writing or composing and performing this music on the record, how did you go about doing that?
Um, well, I never really considered myself a composer. I've always been in awe of composers and anybody who can write a song or a, a symphony, all the way in between. It seems like this mysterious thing you pull down from the heavens. So I just I just started improvising, and it was during the pandemic, and I felt isolated,
Sure.
and so that kind of affected the music that came out. And I always have loved atmospheric music you can put on, and it creates a mood and a space. In the words of Brian Eno, music you could either listen to or ignore.
Right.
So that's one of my favorite types of music. When I'm at home, that's kind of what I listen to all the time. As a working musician, my ears are really full of songs and pieces that I'm working on, and
It could be really
so
fatiguing.
yeah, it's joyful, but also I don't necessarily want music to command my attention when I'm at home. So that had a lot to do with it. I wanted to make music that I wanted to listen to, and so a lot of it was improvised. Um, and I'd start with a, a foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just kind of the tones that came out and the harmonies that came out kind of dictated what would happen next. So in that sense, it's composed, but I feel like it was improvised a lot. Um, the single, which feels funny to call it that because it's not 3 minutes long
Right.
and it doesn't have a hook, but
I don't know if I would say that. I don't know if I agree.
okay. Well, thank you. That was an attempt to okay, I really need a bit of structure. I want to experiment with having some structure and see what I can come up with in that regard. And that was a lot of fun. At first, it was the piece I was the least certain about when I got all the pieces recorded. It just, yeah, I just thought, I don't know if that should be on the record. And when I'd play the album for people, they'd be like, hey, that piece.
Right.
So I fell in love with it, and I'm really happy I experimented with that kind of composition.
The bowed, the sort of repeating theme of the bowed uh, arpeggio is, I mean, it's beautiful and really nice. And the thing that grabbed me about this record is I often think about music like, okay, like, do I like something or do I not like it? Okay, I like it. Do I like it? Why do I like it? I think about things a little bit too much. You know, some things you can just like, I like this right now. I think about, would I have liked this when I was a kid? And I started thinking today, uh, for sure I would have, but I think that I would have liked it for different reasons. And maybe I'm able to recognize it. It seems, I think that I recognized an intensity that in this music that I wouldn't have recognized as a younger person.
Mm.
Like, it would have seemed purely mellow and like less engaging in that way. Not aggressive, but intense. And I wonder if I'm perceiving that accurately, or um
I hope you are. I hope you are. Um, I've heard uh, similar things. That there's a. It feels odd to say this about my own music, but I've heard that there's a depth to it, and it's not just ambient music. There's something going on. Definitely there was an intent behind it. The solitude, the a little bit of despair, and then a little bit of like hope for the future.
Sure.
And who really helped me see that was a couple of people who helped with the record. One is the artist Russell Mills, a brilliant visual artist and also a sonic artist too. He did album covers. He did the album cover for my record, and he's done album covers for Eno and Nine Inch Nails, and she's really, really beautiful artist. And like I said, he put out records, and where he collected sound samples. I'm giving you a long story. Sound samples from his. Okay. So he had a lot of famous musician friends, right? So he asked them, like, give me some sounds. And he collected all these sounds from famous people. And he put together these gorgeous records. Really cool, interesting records.
Wow.
And it's all under the moniker, I think it's under the moniker Undark.
Okay.
You can go to his website and it's all about it there. Yeah. So I was really captivated by him, and he asked me to contribute sounds for an art installation once. And so I kind of felt like, well, maybe I can ask him for a favor. And so he did. Anyway, long story, pointless.
It's awesome.
He mentioned, when I was asking, what do you think about what should be the visual here and all that? And he's like, well, there's a real depth here that's just not the surface,
Right.
And that made me think, oh man, if he's seeing something like this, then maybe there's more to this than I had hoped.
It's not yoga studio. Take your shoes. It's not the lobby music at your local yoga studio. If
good, I'm glad. I don't think so either.
That's not for you. That's more for people who are listening and maybe are not, traditionally ambient music fans.
Right. Ambient and new age kind of get blurred together a little bit. And I love a lot of new age music. I've played some, with some brilliant players. But yeah, I think this is a little different, and it's a story, and, at times it's not very hopeful, and at times it is. So
I get that feeling when I'm listening to it. I was, I had some crazy sort of, I would hesitate to say visions, but visual ideas as I was listening.
Nice.
And I hope that, I don't know. I hope that Loose Groove can help you get that music to as many people and, as many opportunities. I could see it, hopefully being used in some film. Have you done film work?
I would love that.
Yeah.
I played on a soundtrack on one song for the credits of a movie with what's his name? I forget his name. Dave Matthews.
Oh.
But that
I won't make that a highlight. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I think it's theatrical sounding music,
Yeah, for sure.
And I just want to say that, acknowledge other artists who stepped in on my record, if there's time.
Absolutely.
So Facebook is a drag, right? But it can also be a real beautiful thing.
That's how I connected with you.
Yeah. So there's that. And a lot of great things can happen through it. So I met this artist named Peter Chilvers, who brilliant keyboardist, puts out gorgeous albums on his own. But I learned of him through those apps that Brian Eno released maybe in the 90s, early 2000s. They were generative music apps like Bloom. I don't know if you're familiar with that. If you're not. They're still available. You should get them. It's gorgeous.
Okay.
It's an app for your phone, and you can just tap the screen and these tones come out, and you can keep playing it, but if you don't, it will generate music with that information, and it will just never repeat itself. It's gorgeous.
Wow.
That thing ruled my world for a long time. So it turns out Peter Chilvers is the software guy who made those. So
Wow.
that's what made me go, I have to know about this guy. So that's where I looked him up on Facebook. And we kind of started commenting on each other's little music posts. And one of the things he commented on was a bass video I did of a Brian Eno piece. And he really liked it. And I said, well, thank you. I'm a fan of your music. That means a lot. And he said, well, I think I'm becoming a fan of your music. Hey, we should do something sometime. Which just blew me away. It's like, well, sure, I think I could make time for that. So we started talking about, well, how is that going to happen? And I was just beginning to make my record, and I recorded most of it in a cabin down on the Oregon coast. And while I was down there, he sent me one of his pieces, and I put some atmosphere on it. And then I sent him one of my pieces, and it just, the second to the last one, light reflecting off water. Okay. And he just added this beautiful subtlety and helped it, gave it more shape for sure, and texture. And to me, it elevated it so much. I was like, hey, do you think you could do one more piece? So he added some stuff to the last piece, Whispers Behind the Wall. And, some keyboard textures. And then he added this choir from a recording, this ancient recording that just fit perfect. And I thought, okay, well, we have to use this. What are we going to do? And he's like, well, we could get the rights to it, and that could cost money, or we could have someone get close, use it as inspiration. So he got, initially he was going to get Brian Eno's lawyer, who apparently is a really great singer. But she was busy doing legal stuff. So he asked, I don't know if you know Roger Eno, another Brian's brother. And Roger puts out records, and I do a Roger Eno tune on my record. And I just love his compositions. So Peter asked his daughter, Cicely Eno, can you take this as inspiration? And man, she did. And it's gorgeous. I just can't believe how fortunate I was that happened. And I'm really happy with how both those people added to the music. And also Russell Mills, the artist, he just really upped it.
I'm absolutely moved by the enthusiasm that you have in your admiration for these folks and the excitedness that you have to be working with them. Because I see a lot of people who don't have a lot of spark, even though they're still, it doesn't feel like you're grinding. It feels like you're working. to me when I
Well,
hear you.
oh, that's nice. That's nice. You know, I I am very excitable, and you know, music is really exciting, and uh, I feel really fortunate. You know,
Yeah,
it's just I can't get over the fact that how amazing that collaboration happened. So I'm very enthusiastic, and
that's
I just
awesome.
feel super fortunate.
How long were you in this cabin on the Oregon coast?
Uh, 4 days.
So the record was recorded over the course of 4 days, or at least the
Yeah,
foundation.
yes, yeah. One of the pieces was an experiment. Um, when I began posting bass videos during the pandemic, just because I needed to have some kind of creative outlet, people started chiming in like, "Make a record, make a record." Evan Schiller, bless his heart, is the guy who ended up not engineering, but mixing it. He was adamant about it, and then also Regan Hagar, the drummer from Brad, and who also works at the label with Stone.
Mhm.
Regan was also like, make a record. So I didn't have a laptop at the time. I only had a phone and an iPad, which is crazy. Uh, and so Evan was like, get this laptop, get this microphone, start recording, make a
Right.
record. We all got to hear it. So the first piece was like, okay, well, I got that stuff. Now I'm going to have to learn how to use it. So I went out and I started making like videos of a stream, just water flowing by. And I thought, okay, well, now the experiment is to put music to it. So that one, definitely, the first piece was definitely from that era.
How many videos did you make with a piece of video as the inspiration to create a sound bed?
Um, I think three.
Did you find that that was a good way to work because it had parameter?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Having a visual really helped, and yeah, having a parameter, having time. Like this is the amount of time I need,
Right.
and then things drifting through the air. Well, what would that sound like?
Right.
And oh, when the water curls around this stump in the water, you know, try and make something for that.
As awful as it was, the quarantine period of everyone's lives, I feel like for the folks who were fortunate enough to have it together to refocus their energies in non-destructive ways, I think a lot of really great things came.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, you've already said this, but obviously it was a horrible time. But it did breed a lot of uh, creativity, and it kind of made people reevaluate their lives. I know I did. I was a performer who couldn't perform. So what am I going to do? Either I'd have to find an outlet or I would slit my wrists or something.
Sure.
So that really helped. And if it wasn't for the god awful pandemic, this album wouldn't exist. So um, I'm grateful for that aspect of it for sure. For sure.
Well, I think that it's a beautiful, beautiful record, and I'm really glad that you made the decision to make it. And I'm sure that it is going to be very, very well received.
Well, thank you. I hope so. I'm rather proud of it, if I do say so myself. So I'm always very happy and thankful when people react positively to it.
You said that there's also the Brad record that'll be coming out. Do you have intention to do more solo recording or pursue other solo recording projects?
Yeah, definitely. Now that I've done this, and I really want to do more. I keep hearing things. Uh, so yeah, and that was one of the intents of Regan and Stone were both like, well, okay, this could be part one.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to continue this, and I feel like this is music that's really close to me and means a lot. I love playing any music I get a chance to play, and when people ask me what's your favorite type of music to play, my response is whatever music I'm playing at the moment. I just love playing music. But this is music that is, comes from deep in my soul, and so I really want to keep doing that for sure.
Awesome. Well, what about, do you have any intention of performing live ambient music, solo live ambient music?
I've thought about that because it's been asked. It'd be kind of fun, it's definitely a interesting concept. I mean, I went to see ambient artist I really like. I went to see him perform at the Chapel, which is a beautiful venue in Seattle here. Oh yeah, there's another fucking thing I forgot. Another beautiful moment in my musical story. But yeah, I mean, it would take some thought to figure out how to do all that. But I would love it if people wanted to do it. And a friend actually suggested like maybe we could do something with visuals,
Yeah.
a little multimedia thing.
Oh, I think it would be great. I think it would be just great.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad.
I'm going to
I'd
keep my
love to do
eyes
it.
peeled for this
Good.
in hopes that you pursue. Um,
Thank you.
well, listen, thank you for giving me so much time. Your sort of your musical trajectory and just your general energy and enthusiasm is really inspiring. And
Oh, bless
I
you.
think it's important for you to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That means a lot. It does.
Um, I wish you the best in everything you ever do, always.
Thank you. Thanks, man.
I'm gonna stop our recording, but
Okay.
don't disengage because it looks like we're only 80% uploaded.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna say stop.